indecisive, trying to find a pretty girl that these shoes go nice with. Been around the world and back, got a knack for them girls in black, but I need a chick that's gonna hold me tight like vice grips. Just make sure you leave my heart how you found it. You can keep the key, but the lock stays around it. Baby, let's take it slow, no pulling the fast one. And you look like the type to keep my mind off the last one.
There's a lot of pretty girls in this city. There's a lot of pretty girls in this city. I'm trying to pick the right one, trying to pick the right one, trying to pick the right one, trying to pick the right one. There's a lot of pretty girls in this city. There's a lot of pretty girls in this town. I'm trying to pick the right one, trying to pick the right one, trying to find a shorty to hold me down. Tell me, is it you, girl? Is it you, girl? Is it you, girl? Is it you, girl?
Let me welcome Harvard.
Omukono gwano gunkubanga mwenge okutula n'ennyingo gutomeza n'ebisenge. I'm too addicted to hauling sente. Tally on expiry date. Buli kaseera njagala mbewendi. Come a little bit closer, baby. Sembera, wameza nechecho. Sita kubeyo, takala kubeno. Ntekeyo, awo. Sita kubeyo, takala kubeno. Ntekeyo. To make a man shiver, bad girl make a man leave. Got your body, but you make Mr. Lover, lover, and I say I don't get my holla. Anyhow you like, I could do my deal, as long as you know cause balapa. Promise you gon' treat me well. Give me the love and no be kiss and tell. No be say that I whine I know well. But you make a man shiver. Bad girl, bad girl. Panicking and put to love. But when pull up, I can't know if I were. Tell me now. Love panicking, know if I were. Panicking and put to love. But when pull up, I can't know if I were. Tell me now, love panic can't know if I want. Emi mi do te kute, nemi my baby Jessie. Kavi take attention to say. Kumanga wali wonse chenga, wali wechi buzo bambi chembuza. Why it's not to lose control every time that you come around? Panic. And put to love, but when pull up, I can't know if I were. Tell me now, love panic, can't know if I were. Panic me say, let me keep your secret, yeah. Deepest of my heart is the safest place, so yeah. Baby, turn to me and say, girl, I love your body. I panic when I see your body. I admire my baby's body. Hey, yeah. Baby, when you turn up, oh, baby, come to my kupanyo. You're the one that I think, oh, baby. Everywhere you go, I go follow. Panicking and good love. But when good love, I can't know if I was. Tell me now. Love panic and if I was. Panicking and good love. But when good love, I can't know if I was. Tell me now. Love panic and know if I was. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Sitting over and go to say, baby like Eulange, on David and yo viola, Timutu inde bambi, omuwe na kafanani, ako bambi ala venga ko viola, venga mumeme, nange mumeme, alina kabiri viola, akayo yo bambi. Saka indo akalalo koswiti wenze jokira erinyalye okulyogera mpomelwa kozinde konungansani kozidalungalirize obulire nti bulaya abawala bangi abalungi ekyo tekimutiisa kayola malayika wange mama kayola Kamba Viola, Akumendita, Ubagana, Getendi, Mokomendo, Wesigua. La 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 kurudo. Give me love for one thing, now make a bad man sing. For play. Things and now you go hold me down. Jackie by with you I want to settle down. You sweet me like soda, high me like lager, cool it down. All the friends I've been mocking me, all you want is a joke on me. So fair, baby, so fair, baby. All you want is my Unomi wa sukali Jai na kadalasini Wagalo kutuka kumwezi Zikiri zambera sikali Nankukuma nakasali maidani Chesi wanyikole risachi Emisu wendine meka muli yako Usiwa muliga wetulisa Hakanya makambi ufuku choto Ukalini no chusa wondia Hamaso gani kukwe Ituka misinde wompita Zakala tukati wenga yeze koitatia Walivuga kankali Nange diva kalia Zakala tukati wenga yeze koitatia Akachapambala siku mugongo we kusiwa kusiga Obugalo babu kumamukuwani gawazi wangu takula Exceptional. And get it on quarter, it is so professional. How am I so gonna cook with you? Come visit you won't be tired. Yagala to cut the wing, I is a quite a tia. Ooh, what if you got a gali? Kalia, better live. Zakala tukati wenga yese koitatia Tugende muchachi Wafuke my baby We're too lokakane, you're the one that I've been looking for. Tukende muchachi, awful kama baby. We're too lokakane, you're the one that I've been looking for. Kanku bembeta tongana, sisabu tombera ngomwana. Love ya fedala ya kusabira, tuvenga tetwawukana. Bina binina kwa bisana. I want you more than that. I wanna be the father. Babana babuza. Tugende muchachi, ofuke my baby. We're too lokakane, you're the one that I've been looking for. Tugende muchachi, ofuke my baby. We're too lokakane, you're the one that I've been looking for. Tugende muchachi, ofuke my baby. We're too lokakane, you're the one that I've been looking for. Tugende muchachi, ofuke my baby. We're too lokakane, you're the one. Oh, love, love, love. One. What if I couldn't speak? What if I couldn't eat? What if I couldn't move?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being so incredibly punctual. So we have 15 minutes to go until we'll start the workshop. I just wanted to tell everyone that there's tea and coffee in the back. While you're waiting, feel free to grab a cup, and I'll talk to you in 15 minutes. Thank you.
You still love me? What if my body aches and always it makes you late? What if I couldn't wait? It was you long ago. If the blue sky starts to gray and the memory fades away, and the memory fades away, will you still love me?
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Savings Group workshop. We will be starting in 10 minutes. This is the hybrid workshop, so we have some people with us in the room here in Kampala, and thanks also for the global audience making it today. So we will start at 9 and the workshop goes until 1. We will have a series of interactive activities and presentations, including some breakout groups for the online persons as well. So welcome, and if you can please start introducing yourselves in the chat box, that would be great. You can please let us know your name, your organization, and if you need it, you can add as well the type of organization for people who might not know. So are you representing a donor, a microfinance institution, or other type of financial service provider, an NGO, or a fintech, or provider of other type of digital service. So please take a moment to introduce yourself on the chat. And we will also be giving you an opportunity, as we are waiting to kick off, to fill a small exercise through a Jamboard. So we're going to put the link in the chat now. And you will see it's a simple 3W exercise, which is who does what where. You can see it from my screen, but you can also join directly the Jamboard link by clicking the link we've put in the chat box. And the idea here is to let us know what you're doing. This information will be compiled also with what the people in person have been doing. So at the end, we have a comprehensive picture of who is working with saving groups in the refugee response in Uganda. So you can see on the left-hand side, there is a box for analog saving groups. That means working with saving groups that have not been using technology, no digital solution to their work. And then on the right-hand side, you have digital saving groups. So if you go all the way to the left, you can see in the menu, there is a function for sticky note. So you click and create a sticky note. Then you type your organization, your location of activity, and what kind of work you're doing with these groups. And then you post it, and you make sure it's in the right column. So welcome once again, everyone. Pleasure to have you. Please take a moment to fill the Jamboard. I'm going to paste again the link in the chat for the newcomers. And please also take a minute to introduce yourself in the chat box as usual for those hybrid meetings that we are becoming more and more familiar with. Good morning once again, everyone. Thank you for joining. Please take a minute to visit the Jamboard we've set up for our 3W exercise. The objective is to help map who is doing what with saving groups in the refugee response in Uganda. So it will be super important information that we can collate also with the information provided by the people who are attending in person. So at the end we have a comprehensive overview and we can have more potential to have synergies amongst ourselves. So the link to the Jamboard is in the chat box. And if you haven't yet seen the Jamboard tool, it's quite simple. On the left-hand side, you can see there is a panel, and the fourth button from the top is the sticky note. Or you can also do a copy of one of the sticky notes that is on the Jamboard and update it with your information. This Jamboard will remain open, so even later in the meeting, you can take a moment to do that. And it's really great from the chat box. We can see we have people connecting from really many different locations in Uganda. And that's the beauty of doing this hybrid, because we'll have people connecting from Karamoja, from Warmanja, from Kampala. We have some people connecting from abroad. I'm seeing here West Nile. Yeah, so that's great. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. You will see that the presenters are in person, most of them. So we also want to make sure we can get your questions to them. So if at any moment you have a question, you can put it in the chat box. And we will make sure we share it with the moderators here so that it gets to be considered for answer. And the questions we don't have time to cover in the time of the workshop, we will try to respond to individually after. So don't hesitate as questions come through to put them in the chat box. I think someone deleted all the sticky notes from the Jamboard. That's not great. Please don't delete the contributions from the other people. So if your sticky notes have disappeared from the Jamboard, please take a second to go back and see if you can add it again. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. No, good morning. Good morning. I'm not hearing. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Digital Savings Group workshop for the refugee response, organized by the Cash Working Group, the Livelihoods Working Group, UNCDF, and ULearn. We're very happy to have you. For those who've just connected, welcome. Please take a minute to introduce yourself in the chat box, and also please visit our Jamboard to fill in the 3W exercise that will allow us to know who does what where. So on the left-hand side of this Jamboard, we have some space to input your contribution if you're working with saving groups who do not have technology or digital solutions in their function at the moment. And on the right-hand side, you can log in if you have any kind of digital solution working with saving groups. We will be kicking off the workshop shortly with opening remarks from a speaker in person. And we have this workshop set up to run until 1 p.m. There will be several interactive exercises, and when we are doing the breakout groups, the facilitators will invite you to turn on your videos to make the exercises more fun and more engaging, and we are able to connect with one another because there will be some role play. We are looking forward to this workshop. Please, if you have questions at any moment, you can drop them in the chat
everyone.
box, and we'll make sure we are transferring them
It's
to
at 9 o'clock.
the
Actually, it's
speakers
9:05,
here.
so we'll be getting
you.
started. I first going to ask everyone to close their computers, and it's very hard. I'm so sorry. Very happy to be helping to organize this event today, together with this workshop, rather, with Ronald from UNCDF over there. Say hi, Ronald. With Eunice from the Cash Working Group, and with Paul from the Livelihoods and Resilience Sector Working Group. I'm actually not the one who's going to talk now, so I've already said too much. So I'm just going to hand over to Ronald so he can get us started.
Great, thanks, Malaika. I think I think Marika, you mentioned earlier that it's incredible that we are starting on time, and also helpful for the online audience that are connecting. I think to get us started, I'm also we've invited Microfinance Support Center to provide opening remarks. Some of you may know that Uganda has a rural financial services strategy, and central to that is the work that Microfinance Uganda Limited does. And I think, considering the bigger picture, we may be talking about savings groups today, but the bigger picture is how we implement, we actionalize that rural financial services strategy. We could not have a better person provide us the opening remarks than Rachel Kobugabe, who has been for a long time with the Microfinance Support Center, and Rachel's position is the Senior Institutional Development Officer. You're welcome, Rachel.
Yes, thank you so much, Ronald. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I've been introduced, and Malaika looked at my presentation. She was like, oh my God, this is too much. So I'm going to really try and cut it short. I've even timed myself. But when I was asked to make this presentation, I quickly jumped onto the opportunity because this day and this particular workshop is very important for me, but also for the microfinance sector at large, and particularly for Uganda and the other people, of course, who are learning from what we are going to discuss. So I would want to thank the partners that have put together this workshop, and please, I request that we give them a round of applause for thinking through and giving us the opportunity to come into this one room and have this discussion. I'm going to share experience from our 20 years of financial inclusion and the work that we've done with several partners, but also I will share the lessons we've learned, but also what we would request the other partners that are coming on board to support us to do. Because as we know, financial inclusion cannot be a one-man agenda. It has to be collaborative. So I will, it's very difficult right now to skip slides, but I will try to run through and maybe slightly about the Microfinance Support Center. Please allow me to tell you about the Microfinance Support Center because some of you might not know. It's a government institution supervised by the Ministry of Finance, and its core mandate is to provide subsidized credit for the rural but also urban poor, active poor. We do subsidized credit ranging between 8% to 17% per annum, and 8% is mostly for the groups, actually, the saving groups that we're discussing today. So there's a lot of government effort towards supporting financial inclusion. As Ronald has stated clearly, there is a strategy for financial inclusion. And we are celebrating 20 years of financial inclusion this year. So we call upon partners to continuously follow what we are doing and also to come on board, and we work together. So we are, okay, I'll leave Microfinance Support Center at that, but I'll share more material so that you can get to know more of what we do. Quickly about our discussion today. I'll just really give a few highlights because I believe there are more people that are going to come and discuss. You don't have to present this. No, you don't have to because I'm going to skip a lot of slides. Our discussion today touches the core of our social and economic transformation, which is a major contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. And not only one, which talks about poverty, not 17 alone, but all, almost all. Because when you work with the groups that are actually having the biggest population of our world, actually, globally, the savings groups have the biggest population. So if you work and organize and support these groups, you're actually touching and contributing greatly towards the SDGs. And when you look at all the 17, you're actually working with almost all of them through these groups. Ministry of Finance reported that before the pandemic, I'll talk about slightly about that, our poverty levels were about 28%. That was around 2021. And then they dropped drastically after the pandemic. The studies that came, the other reports that came, to 18%. Okay? Poverty levels actually increased, they increased by 10%. So UNDP also stated that about 4.4 million workers were dropping into extreme poverty. So that increases the target. All the efforts that we had made prior to the pandemic have almost been challenged. And that means that our coverage, our thought process, and our efforts have to double as well. So it takes us back to what we have done, reflecting on the efforts that we had put in and the achievements that we had made prior. But also, before we could even talk about the pandemic and, start to craft solutions, now we have issues of inflation, all right? And it also goes down to really, it goes back to what we are trying to address, getting the groups financially included. But then again, they are challenged. The prices are running high. And most of the money they would be saving is actually now going into buying most of the basic needs that we need in our homes and in our households. So we have to broaden our perspective, our thinking, and our strategies as we continuously discuss the digital saving groups. Saving groups basically have improved the lives of people when you look at several studies. And I would want also to thank the partners that we've worked with. We've worked with Masiko in the northern Uganda. We've worked with Goal Uganda. We've worked with Nsibuko. I was trying to scan the room and see whether I can notice. Hi. Yes, we have partners that we've worked with, and we continuously have discussions with UNDP, and that's how we got to know Ronald and the team. But like I mentioned earlier, it's an effort. It's a combined effort towards improving, supporting, and promoting financial inclusion. I'll just quickly give a sneak peek into the project that we implemented with Nsibuko in northern Uganda as I close, because I'm looking at my time and it's running fast. So we all know that the few studies that we have, actually I noticed that we don't have a lot of studies on saving groups. When I was trying to prepare for this presentation, and I discussed, and then I was told that actually today we are going to have one of the studies discussed, which is a very good thing. So, but the few studies that I came across show that we've made a number of efforts towards technology improvement, although we still have a challenge with phone penetration. Because when you talk about digital services, you're talking about technology, phone technology, basically. So in Uganda, so far we are at 69.2%, but then that is mostly in the urban centers, where we have 70% of that penetration in the urban centers. And then we only have 25% in the rural areas. So that shows that we still have a lot of work to do. When we are talking about digital saving groups, how much have we supported the digitalization? How much have we supported the phone penetration into the rural communities, where actually the poverty levels are high? So I wanted to bring that to light, and then we can have the discussion. But going back to the project that we did with Nsibuko and Goal Uganda, we did one project. It was almost like a pilot project to get into the digital space. We digitalized 100 VSLAs in Lira and Agago districts. But then we had to do this. We had to train them. That was one. We had to equip them with smartphones. Those are 100 smartphones. And then also give them new Airtel SIM cards, but also load that with data. So if you're looking at 100 and you have to do all that work, I would want us to think about how much work we need to do, how much investment we have to make sure that we digitalize across the country. So we all know the benefits of digitalization. I'll skip that. But we've realized the number of lessons. Benefits are really good. People are able to check their transactions. It increases transparency. It gives more confidence of the members into the group. But also, because people were hit by the challenge of lockdown, they embraced it, because we did this last year in around January. And they embraced it because they could easily now, communicate without necessarily meeting. But then it also came with its own challenges. We also learned that it's a journey. It requires a lot of hand-holding. You need to mentor, to coach, to provide digital literacy. That is apart from the financial literacy that you have to begin with. So it takes a bit of time, and so the impact is, you realize the impact after a period of time. And that calls for partners to come on board, to do studies, impact studies, M&E, to make sure that you pick the lessons. That calls for partners to be in the field all the time. That when we get out of this room, we hit the field and go into a Google and check what is happening there. So the realities on ground, as I conclude, there is low technology adaptation. Members have high levels of illiteracy when it comes to technology. The data that runs the system, or the apps, is quite expensive. And so that leaves people really wondering whether they should move technology or they should go back to their manual systems. Then with smartphone batteries, where to charge from, electricity, there are efforts, of course, for that, but it's still low when it comes to really the rural areas. Then the type of phones that we even give to these people may not be really the best, because there's a lot of complaint when it comes to that. Penetration in terms of the infrastructure, there's still a lot of government effort towards that, but there's still more work to be done. So I'm just throwing these for us to think through and ask ourselves, how best can we approach digital saving groups improvement? Just my parting shots. What is our intention when we approach saving groups? Is it more of the mission for microfinance or our own sustainability? Are we looking at business cases? If we are looking at business case, then microfinance is not the space that we are going to make money. The mission is more important, and that calls for a lot of partner support and funding. Then what measures are we putting in place to reduce the expense level of managing the development aspects of groups? How can we support the groups without necessarily creating a dependency syndrome, because we are having that challenge? And the need for more studies. Thank you so much for listening to me. Yes.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for getting us started today and for asking some challenging questions. I'm sorry, I'm trying to plug in. Here we go. And thank you for asking those questions. They're very apt, because a lot of them will be discussed today. One of the things that we'll be looking at in the main part of the day is looking at... Great. We'll be looking indeed at benefits and challenges of making saving groups digital. So it's been a good setting of the scene for us all. Thank you very much, so much. Rachel Kobugabe from the Microfinance Support Center. So now, before we get into the real meat of the day, I just wanted to give us a couple of pointers and kind of introductory elements. So first of all, I want to say, wow, I'm very amazed by the turnout today. It's great to see all of you in the room. Also, please don't forget that we are joined by about 100 people last I checked online. So therefore, you're seeing a lot of tech around, the cameras, the mixer, etc. So we're in this new world where we're going hybrid. I don't think it's going to go away. So you'll have to apologize in case we have technical difficulties. They are unavoidable, but we try to do our best to have as few as possible. We're very excited to see the spread of people in this room. We have people from a little bit very different walks of life, microfinance institutes, service providers, humanitarian actors, Bank of Uganda is here. We have UN agencies. So we're really happy to be able to bring together all these actors. Some people have even come from, the settlements to participate in the discussion. So thank you very much for that. And we're so happy to bring all these people together to be able to really do a deep dive into digital saving groups or saving groups and making them digital. So Then what I wanted to say was just introduction of the organizing team. So I'm not going to have everyone introduce themselves, but I'll just shout out. So if everyone just could quickly stand up. We have Paul Muchiria from the Livelihood Sector Working Group. Eunice Mwende from the Cash Working Group. We have Ronald Rakubigabu. Oh, I'm so sorry. From UNCDF. Oh, Ronald, sorry, you can be very angry with me after. But then there's also a lot of people, of course, behind the scenes. We have Colleen and Charlene over there from ULearn managing the online sessions. We have Andy, who's been doing a lot of the work behind the scenes. Norman is helping out. So and Esther, of course, from UNCDF also. We're all here to help. So if you have any questions today, any issues whatsoever, grab one of us. We'll be around the whole day, of course. I've been asked to flag the bathrooms. So the gents' bathroom is over there, and the ladies' bathroom, interestingly enough, is in the other room. So we'll have the main sessions over here, and then the breakout groups will just be next door. Then I'm going to just say SOPs. We're still in COVID-19, so unless there's a 2-meter distance, we recommend that you wear your mask. And then, as I mentioned already, I'm a very big sucker for having everyone non-tech in the room, even though we're going to be talking about tech the whole day. So please, if you could all try and minimize being on your laptops. It's such a unique moment to be together, so let's really use it. And then throughout the day, you'll be able to ask questions. There are forms on your table. There's a very beautiful purple basket over there. Just drop them in there. Norman and Charlene online will be collecting those questions, and at the end of the day, Ronald will answer a couple of them or channel them to other people if he feels like someone else can answer them better. So please do remember to put your questions in the basket. Then for the agenda, just saying we'll be starting, Ronald will be taking us through a couple of key concepts. We'll have you get up and walk to do some definitions yourself. Then Paul and Eunice will be setting the scene for us, even though we already had a bit of an introduction to the theme, so that's really great. We did a bit of background work, speaking with key actors, collecting all of the key evidence, so that's what they will be presenting to you. And then the main part of the day is really group work. So we'll be doing a role play exercise with scenarios. That will be about an hour. We'll go into a break, and then we'll come back for a lightning plenary. So this will only be 20 minutes. The facilitators of all of the breakout groups will just speak up 1 minute each. We'll try to keep it very condensed. Then we have a second exercise where we'll be looking at recommendations and moving it forward. And then the Q&A I just mentioned. And then something we're really, really excited about, at the end of the day, we'll have a fair of service providers who provide digital services for saving groups. And so in the room, that will be in the other room, they're setting up as we speak. And online, we'll have an online fair. So do stick around until the end so you can meet and greet all of the service providers. I think that is everything that I wanted to share with you today. So without further ado, I'll ask Ronald to come back up to the stage and define some key concepts with us.
Great, thanks, Marike. Actually, rather than define the concept, it would be a nice to actually test, see what different perceptions we have in the room, and then start to see if there is a convergence of ideas. So for example, one of the terms I've had this morning and which kind of features a lot, and I personally also struggle with it, is digitize versus digitalize. And in this study, it is something that unexpectedly became important to look at closely because there was a continuum. It was not a one-point pin in the journey of digitizing VSLS, but what we tended to see was a continuum. So rather than influence your perceptions about digitize and digitalize, we have two flip charts at the back. So one has digitize, another has digitalize. And it would be interesting to see what your views are on each, and then after this 5-minute exercise, I will run through some of those, but also for the online audience, there is a board where you will be able to type. My colleague Charlene and Kulain are going to enable for you to be able to share your thoughts on each of the two. And so I will run through the online perceptions as well, and then also the in-person meeting perceptions. So I think what's missing is the sticky post-it, yeah? So I think on the tables, I tend to see we have some on the table. So if you don't have, we can also make that available for you. So let's get that started with. Thank you very much.
Okay, so from our side online, we're going to do this through a Menti, an online poll system. So please click the link we just put in the chat box. Please join us on the Menti. And we are going to be asking a couple of questions. So you can see the first question for our Menti is, what do you understand by the term digitization in reference to saving groups? Please join us on Menti. The link is in the chat box.
Excuse me? Chop, chop, chop. Let's put our sticky notes.
What do you understand by the term digitization with reference to saving groups? We can see the answers rolling in. Please continue. We have 88 participants for this meeting, which is great. So I can see some of the answers include making savings in electronic version, using online applications or softwares for the group, keeping the transaction records in electronic form, migrating paper-based procedures of savings to electronic formats. That's great. So we're going to go to the next question.
So we're looking at digitize and digitalize in relation to saving groups. And I'm just going to switch so we can see what they're coming up with.
Sorry, 1 second. We're going to get to the next question. Plain. The question. We need the next one. The next question. Okay, so for this next question, if you're connected, you can see we're asking what you understand by the term digitalization with reference to saving groups. Please take a moment to take also the second question. What do you understand by the term digitalization with reference to saving groups? Great, we can see some of the answers coming. And in person, people are also contributing with sticky notes, same questions as you have. They're almost done. So some of you are still inputting, and we're going to be feeding back to the group to merge our findings.
Records to electronic, we see along with keywords emerging is automation from financial operations, and I think the same word but broken down, making records or transactions of saving groups electronic. I think that's the same word we saw around transition, transforming. Would be nice to see how the online audience defined digitize. And as we get the digitize, the online version, I will also check the digitalize for us in the house. So some of the comments are, of course, we're seeing the terms transformation of workflows to digital, process of converting information into digital formats, the process. I think online we saw the use of the word transition, and more comments around digitalize is the change in the process, moving from manual to automation, ability of everyone to use the digital gadgets. So on the digitalize in both here and online, one of the common threads seems to be this idea of transforming, moving from manual to digital. And it's interesting because now let's look at digitize, and we see then how do we handle the digitize piece. And I think let's start again with online. So online on the digitizing component, enabling technology, we are seeing migrating the paper-based procedures. And I think what we see with digitize is almost the similar comments are on the digitalize, which is also why this is very interesting. And then there's also the comment of process of using electronic forms for savings. So automation, interesting. We also have automation, VSLA records. So it's still, this concept of moving from manual systems to electronic systems. Now, if we take a check now also for the in-person, we are seeing converting of information, introducing digital principles, using of digital platform. Now we are looking at digitize, and remembering the themes that came from the digitalize. So putting existing groups online, a conversion of manual process. So what you may agree with me is that the distinction, is quite kind of blurred, but both terms are used interchangeably in various studies. So one of the things we didn't expect was, I will switch maybe to this. So as Marika gets the slides back, one of the things we didn't plan for when we were doing the research, we didn't think that this would be like a place we would start, like the difference between digitalize and digitize. But we did find that it was helpful to kind of see what people who use digitalize were thinking about and digitize, and hopefully this can be an interesting conversation to move forward. So what we tend to see with digitize is mostly getting a component of what the savings group is looking to have digital. So for example, digitize generally is looking at, you could digitize records, you could digitize a certain component of what the, since we are talking of savings group, what the savings group is having. And the unique thing about when the term digitalize is used is there's this emphasis of now systems that are integrated. And in the savings group component, we did see that continuum start to emerge. That a lot of, for example, the financial technology companies were saying is that digitalized is the aspiration. Like members are able to save on their phone, transfer to the VSLA wallet and all that. But they always remind us that digitize is the beginning point. That they need, first of all, to understand who are those members of the savings group. They need to start with those baby steps so that the group may still meet, for example, in their usual weekly meetings, and then it's once they've collected the money, they can put it on the group mobile money wallet. But that extent of digitalize where they are able to, for example, MTN was reminding me on their menu, people are able to withdraw, push, you know, the same maybe with Airtel. So that extent goes into a whole, I think the word I made borrow is transform. I think here what I see is interesting. Also the word transformation comes in. So it's this whole holistic savings group that has all these functionalities and capabilities. While with digitize, it's more of like you have a component that you move from manual, as we've seen, towards automation, and it may be towards that end goal. So that's kind of what did emerge. And then the last slide before I invite, Marika invites my colleagues who are going to present some of the initial findings from the study, is we've also found that savings groups were very nuanced. So, yeah, so we did find, for example, there were rotational savings and credit associations. Many of us are members of those merry-go-round, where there is an expectation that there is a month, at the end of the month, there's some sharing. They are also accumulating savings and credit associations. With them, you tend to see that members save, but there's no obligatory kind of monthly withdrawal. But there is an aspiration that they are trying to maybe accumulate this for a certain purchase or things like that. And then what we usually refer to as village savings and loans associations, because I think here the emphasis tends to be around interest, tends to be around it operating, I would say, as close as possible to a normal financial account, whereby you don't have a date where you're going to cash out. You don't have an expectation that a certain member is going to draw out in a given month, but you're putting in your savings, you're drawing them as needed, but you're also earning an interest. And I think from village savings and loans association to savings and internal lending communities, the emphasis starts to go a bit more into the investment angle of the savings group. And what many of us would interact with is you'll see that level of sophistication varies depending on the ability of the members. So what I know what I know is the iron is the first one, the rotating one. It's very popular regardless of the segment. Even in Kampala, I know people who are part of those because, you know, it's something, and I think sometimes there's a throw of a dice on who actually gets on that day. And maybe if you're the one who got the previous month, maybe you don't get. So this is some of the nuances we saw in the research around the bulking of savings groups alone. You may need to dig deeper. So digitalize may be something to dive a bit deeper into depending on the aspirations, but also savings groups tend to be nuanced. So with this, I guess I would like to hand back to Marike, because it would be interesting to find out what some of the findings are. Yeah.
Thank you, Ronald, for getting us all on the same page. So, yes. Then we're now going to have a little overview of the landscape in Uganda on digital saving groups. As I mentioned earlier, this will be done by Paul of the Livelihood Sector Working Group and Eunice of the Cash Working Group. Just a quick reminder, do write down your questions. They might come up during this presentation, and put them in the basket. If you haven't completed the 3 W's, please also stick your note on there. Eunice and Paul.
Thank you, Marike and Donald and Rachel for setting the ground. What we are going to be presenting here, myself and Eunice, is actually the work that is from you. These are the feedback that you gave us. And I would like to start by appreciating Andy, who was very instrumental in organizing meetings. She sat in so many meetings, she read so many documents and analyzed to give us what is the landscape in Uganda. To start us with, basically savings group definition, or where we start to see savings group becoming more pronounced, is around the 1990s in Uganda. Of course, that could be because of variant reasons. The levels of instabilities as were there before could not help the country define what a savings group was. But now with the stability that is there, then savings group became more pronounced. Most of these groups, like you saw from what Ronald has just presented with us, is that you are having groups having a general fund where all the money is being put in, and from that fund is where members then borrow from and repay back with an interest. And most of the groups will also have a social, or what the others will call a welfare kitty. So normally the general fund is people are buying shares, so they could say, for us our share is 10,000. So for everyone that's a minimum, and you can buy maybe a maximum of 5 shares or 10 shares, so they define it. And then the social fund, which is normally a small amount, could range from as minimum of 500 to as high as 10,000, 20,000, depending on the strength of the group. And then from that social fund, people can borrow with it, but it doesn't have to be paid back with interest. Some groups that are very advanced, they will still charge an interest on that one. Normally, savings group are being used or they provide the most basic social safety net for households. People who do not have a bank account, for instance, they cannot go into a bank and borrow that money. They are not in any other formalized financial institution. They cannot go in and borrow when they need money. They need to pay school fees, they need medical care, they need to buy seed for the agricultural produce. So for most households, this is the basic social safety net. And we're talking about a very big group. From our standards, it shows we have about 63,500, close to 64,000 formalized groups that we're able to map. And that means it's about, if you take an average of 25 to 30 members, that's about 1.6 million people, or 1.6 million households that are relying on that kind of platform for their financial inclusion and financial services. Most of these groups, offer financial literacy. So there is some training. They are trained on how to save. They are trained on how to invest. They are trained on how to borrow and to pay back. They are trained on what is good and bad debt, so that they do not end up failing after a short time. And for more advanced groups, of course, they are now taught on investment, business skills. So there is a variety and a cocktail of services or trainings that are offered by partners, sometimes even financial institutions that take up some of these groups into their work. Most of the groups that are supported by humanitarian workers or the NGOs are also provided with the basic items or equipment. Most of them will be given a cash box. They will have a passbook where they kind of write, what is each person giving. They'll be given basic things like given padlocks because the money is kept in a box. So that's some form of security. And they're also taught on how, to do the group dynamics, who keeps the key, who has access to the passbooks and all of that. So most of the organizations that help us transform the savings group provide that basic item. Rachel was gracious enough to mention that in the groups they support and they give a smartphone. And of course that is now becoming a new norm. If you want to digitize and you find the group doesn't have it, you give a smartphone. But what does that do to the equilibrium of the market? There's someone already who is in that business of phones, right? And SIM cards. Are we destabilizing that market, or are we making that market stable? Or are we, someone is saying we are disrupting it, or are we actually advancing the market? So those are some of the things that I would like you to consider today as we have this discussion. It's for us to draw what is the bare minimum. If we're saying a smartphone is the basic, what kind of smartphone? Is it a $100 smartphone? Is it an iPhone for 1,000 plus that we want to give? If you are giving that, can those groups actually be able to maintain it? For the fintech, where is the app? Is it on open source? Is it proprietary? So those are some of the discussions. In Uganda, we see most of our savings group, there are more women, averagely about 72%. And this is because, again, men have other forms of income, higher amounts of income, and therefore they are more predisposed to engage with the mainstream financial service providers. And where women who do not have access or may not have as high level of income as the men, then are more prone to be into savings group. And that's why you see there are more women. However, what is interesting is that when we have more women into savings group, the men actually save more. So if women are, say, saving $2, the men will be saving $5. Again, it's an issue of income. If I have more income, then I'm more likely to go to save more than someone who has less income. And we've seen this in quite a lot of works with some of the projects that we've done where I've been involved. When we start with an activity like Cash for Work, you find those groups tend to save more. And like groups that do not have access to that kind of an activity. So you find in those groups, on average, I have seen them saving at the end of the year between 8 to 15 million. Groups that do not have that access of an income are saving as little as 600,000. So you can see the disparities is also quite high. On average, we saw that an household or a member was saving an average of $73, which is about 250,000 Uganda shillings. And the average loan or credit that members were getting is about $44. That's about 150,000 Uganda shillings. Before COVID, the savings were quite high. The borrowing was quite high. But with COVID, of course, a lot of businesses were disrupted, incomes were greatly affected. So there was a huge decline in the amount of savings and the amount of credit that members were being given. moving forward, a few issues around the legal and policy environment. One, we have the Uganda Microfinance Regulatory Authority that has been kind of the governing body around the microfinance for savings group and SACCOs. However, it's the SACCOs that have a direct requirement to register and be supervised. The savings group, on the other hand, were kind of advisory, degraded body. Mainly because many of them will not even have the money to register. When you tell them to register and they need that fee, they would say, this is the money we need to share out. We should not be paying out. Yeah, so it even comes on when some of these groups also mature and we think they are now mature to stand on their own and we need them to pay for a passbook of 1,000 Uganda shillings, they still think, no, you need to give us a passbook. So they feel that, no, our money should not be spent on issues like registration and governance, and rather our money should be spent on us. So that has been a gap in terms of how they are supervised and how they are regulated. However, they can actually register through the Roko Sindio office for a small fee, especially those that want to engage. In the refugee space, we've seen some of those groups that want to provide services. So you have a savings group that is then doing goat rearing, or they're doing carpentry, a shop, and they would like to supply that to an organization. And because most of the NGOs will require you to have some form of registration, then those groups go ahead and register. So there's that registration. And this was guided by the Act of the 2016. We also have the UCC that has operational guidelines for mobile network operators. And I would like to point out a few challenges on this. UCC has for a long time been managing a lot of issues around the telecommunication, and without a very clear guideline on how to manage the mobile, which is the financial. But for a long time, that was the case. Recently, in 2021, we got the National Payment Systems Act, which now separated the telecoms from the financial. So you have MTN, but now you have the MTN mobile money, you have Airtel, and you have Airtel money as two separate entities. So the telecommunication is still under UCC, while the money, the financial, now goes to the Bank of Uganda to supervise that. Some challenges that we saw with a lot of groups when between 2018, 2019, even most of 2020, is the registration. They know your customer requirements. For refugees especially, the mobile network operators would require that you have a refugee card, but that card was not easy to get. Through a lot of advocacy with the cash working group, donors, and the UN entities, we were able to get some of those requirements relaxed a bit, so now they can use attestation, they can use other letters. The banks, on the other hand, are a bit more flexible, but also complicated. So a bank might require you to come with a refugee card, but they might also tell you, bring a letter from your commandant, or bring a letter from your Refugee Welfare Council. So then you have to go and get additional letters for you to be able to open an account. But nonetheless, we are actually very happy with the government for being very flexible and working with us through this journey to adjust and make changes that enable refugees to be part of, to be able to access those services and be able to, for instance, register SIM card. However, through some of those standards, we saw that about only 17% of refugees, after the changes, are actually able to access. Again, it's an issue of facilitation, bringing the service providers to where the refugees are, establishing more points so that they can be able to utilize them. At this point, I'll hand over to my sister Eunice to take us through the next steps.
You will clap for him again because he's coming back. So thank you, Paul, for laying the landscape of what we are seeing so far in the aspect of the savings groups in Uganda. I'll just take you through a few of more slides just to shed more light in terms of what we have been able to discuss with yourselves. As Paul had said, this is all based on the discussions that we've had with you. What we are seeing is that many of you, as you were entering, we had a discussion and some of you are saying, we are not really digital. We are just starting. We are not sure whether we've digitalized or we are not really sure what aspect of digital we are in. I just want to emphasize that a lot of the service providers that we are seeing in the digital space are actually new. The methodologies and the modes that we have are varied. Most of them are relatively new, and some of them, and majority of them, you will attest for those that sit in this room, a lot of them are actually supported through grants. Rachel said something very important, that without the grants, we might not really see the growth in terms of the savings group. And I want to pose a few questions here. Based on what we have discussed so far, I think the question that begs is, how sustainable are the groups that we are seeing currently? You know, we know that many of these extensive partners are new. Some of them have tried to really come up with a sustainable way that would make sure that the groups exist beyond them. But this has been a big challenge in terms of establishing sustainability. You will agree with me that some of these groups exist as long as they are supported. The moment you pull your support like this, those groups vanish and you cannot find them anymore. You come again with a savings group project and the groups mushroom again. So how can we make sure that this is not something that we are driving as the humanitarian organizations or as actors in the refugee response space? The NGOs, which form majority of the people in the room today, are the interlocutors between the savings group and the profits, you know, those that are there to make a business case, as Rachel had mentioned. And one of the key things that we are seeing is that in the digital space, some of them have been able to create their own digital services. Others are utilizing third parties to provide the digitizing of services. Yet others are having partners that have digital application services. What is key that I would like to emphasize here is that the trust between the groups and those that are supporting them will either determine whether they will continue to exist beyond your grant or not. So for example, if an organization is supporting a number of saving groups, the trust they establish within the groups actually determines the survival of that particular group. So it's very personal, it's very interpersonal related. And sometimes you find, I don't know whether this has been the case, you have also witnessed this, that you go to the settlements and this group says, we are organization X group. Why? Because they relate to that particular organization and they think they are owned by that particular organization, right? So that actually is a key aspect that with trust also comes a lot of responsibility. When you are an organization X group, then this organization feels obliged to continue finding resources to support these particular groups. I know a number of you are supporting groups. Do these groups consider you as the donor, you know, as the person that brings resources to the groups? If you don't exist, then the groups also likely do not exist. And so we are seeing a lot of responsibility being embedded to the NGO that is supporting the particular savings group. You don't only have a responsibility of finding resources, but linking that group to the right financial institution. You know, you want to make sure you have done your due diligences. You are the one who is going to make sure that you have had conversations with the microfinance, with the banks, to ensure that you're linking that particular group to the right financial institution. And just to note, before I move to the next slide, is that it's not clear how agencies who are working within the refugee sectors select who is going to be the financial institution that is going to link the village, the savings groups. For example, we don't know whether people choose because this is the most known name that is dealing with digital services for groups. Do you select based on the fact that this one has been the leader in the market? Or do you look at who is most known when it comes to this space? So that's very unclear in terms of how the financial linkages are done for the savings group. So there are three main digital saving group services providers that we have seen so far. There are those that digitize the saving groups records, and I think this has also been discussed a bit in the morning today. They do everything the analog way, but when it comes to the records, they digitize this. So it means that they have a place where you can actually access the records that the group has, but when it comes to how they play their money, how they exchange their money between themselves, this is done in the analog way. So they do it on the paper way. Then there are those groups that digitize the records and allow some digital transactions. We have a few examples of those that do that. For example, LedgerLink, and there are those that also allow some few transactions. In fact, some others also allow you to have a dashboard where you can actually see what is happening to the savings group. And that's one example that we can give. Then there are those that digitize the record and combine with other features. Just for example, if you want to do monitoring of the group, you have an M&E link that you can actually access through the groups. I mean, because of the records that they provide to you, you are able to actually follow up very keenly. So these are the three main service providers that we are seeing. Those that only digitize the records, those that only allow a little bit of the digital transactions, and there are others that combine even more features, including even, for example, accessing more phones and everything like this. We are seeing also a number of business structures, and the services that are being offered, they depend on the business type or the business structure types that are being provided. If it's an NGO, for example, you will have a little bit of more extensive, more interpersonal relationships with the groups. If it is a non-profit, then it's a little bit different. And if it's a social enterprise, of course, it's going to be very different. So the level of services that are being provided depends on who is actually providing it. And that's very important because we have seen also a number of, the private sector relying more on the humanitarian sector or the development actors to link them to the saving groups so that they can have more access and a longer-term sustainable relationship with them. And just to, on my final slide, we know that we are talking about digitizing savings groups. And we all know the kind of population that we are targeting. These digitizing, of course, will solve a lot of challenges. For example, the errors in record keeping, fraud issues. We are seeing less and less of that when we go to the digital space. But you will agree with me that this digital will also create new challenges. For example, we are dealing with refugees in most of the spaces. We are dealing with refugees or populations that have very little literacy. If you can be defrauded yourself through a defrauder on your phone, what about that vulnerable person back in the village or in the population that we are working with? And the schemers have become even more smarter. You know, they have devised even smarter ways. So when you think you are catching up, they come up with new ways of how they can defraud people. So that lack of digital literacy for refugees, but also for other populations, is a key aspect and a key challenge that we need to think about. My colleagues also talked about the digital divide. The fact that, most of the times the savings group attract a bit older, not so much the youth, more women than men, as Paul has mentioned. So there's actually a digital divide. Some of the challenges are actually being addressed right now. For example, we have spoken to a number of you that have come up with network connectivity solutions. So you don't really need to have a network, a smartphone, for example, that is network enabled for you to access some of this group. Some of them are accessing through the SMSs or through USSD. And you can actually be able to transact offline as you wait to be online. On the issue of smartphones, we have seen some providing subsidized smartphones or feature phones that can be able to conduct some form or level of internet transactions. We have also seen, in some cases where power sources is a big challenge, the provision of solar systems or solar energy, either by loan or a payment methodology is actually agreed upon, where people can pay the solar devices over a period of time. So some of these practical challenges are being addressed, but we have to remember that we have to do this in a very responsible manner, because as much as we are solving problems, we know that digital is going to create more challenges. But without dumping the whole discussion, I would like Paul to maybe just come back and discuss about the benefits we are seeing on using the digital platforms.
Thank you, Eunice. Yeah, I was checking how we are doing with time, so I saw I did a good job at the start to keep our time well. I will do the same to end it on time. Our timekeeper can be tough. So some of the benefits that we saw from the study, talking to a lot of partners, we're not going to go through all of them, but we'll just check a few of them. I just wanted to pick up from where Eunice talked about the new challenges about digital, especially around front. A few of you may be checking or following news in Kenya, may have seen a very sensational feature that was called the committee call center. You know, committee is the maximum prison. So there's a call center in the maximum security prison in Kenya, and this guy, David Ted, who is calling and says, I am an expatriate working in Kakuma, and I'm looking for someone to marry. And he has defrauded many people to the extent that at one point, the Chief Justice in Kenya was actually defrauded by that call center. So you can imagine if it goes all the way to someone that senior, someone who has very little knowledge or understanding of digital technologies is probably more susceptible to be defrauded. And that's something that we need to be thinking about as we are advocating for digital. So one of the things we saw, and especially during COVID, is a reduction in travel. There was a lockdown. We could not get out of our houses. There are days we spent weeks without getting even outside of our homes. And so for groups to meet through digital, it was then easy, because all you needed is to send your money. If you're actually on the tier 3, which is giving digital services, digitizing the records plus other services and transactions, then you could easily just send your money and you don't have to go there, so you reduce that. And then reduced meeting time. Most of that time is spent around, trying to balance the books, put the records, but if you're doing it digitally, then that time is reduced. This is a benefit, but it also becomes sometimes a challenge. Remember, we are meeting the bottom layer of people under or who are excluded in financial services. And therefore, for them, a savings group meeting is a time where they meet to get additional training. It's a time for them to meet and get, what is the news around? What is the business that is coming? What is the commodity price? When is the other market going to work? What are the new bylaws in our sub-county? And so with that reduced time, we've actually robbed them of an opportunity to be able to get those other social benefits that are accrued by people meeting. Most of you here, we met and we are saying we've been talking to each other on computers, and we are happy that today we can meet and put faces to names. And that is the same thing that is happening with the digital groups with our savings group, when they move digital, they miss that element. Two, there is an increase in digital literacy. People are now more familiar. They know, this big one, the dashboard. Some of them now know what is a dashboard. They can go there and see our group, cycle 1, we have saved this much, this is how much profit we got. Cycle 2, we're doing this. And when they go to a microfinance, they can easily say our group has made this kind of progress. And people also now have, they're able to use their smartphones. Some of the financial service providers or the fintechs are offering services as big as insurance. That's like an high-end market information and many more. So there's increased digital literacy. And one more I'd like to talk about is, there is in calculation. A lot of time is spent, people trying to balance up their books. How much did you contribute? How much interest are you paying? And how much do you need to pay back? But with the digital, that is already automated. So it's very easy and reduces the fraud. But that can also become a challenge. And I want to stop there so that when you go to our groups, we can argue on those, looking at them not only on one lens, but both as a challenge and a benefit. So the benefit of the auto-calculation is good. But imagine you're in a group where there's only one smartphone, which means me, who is a very literate person, who is also the chairman, it means I can also manipulate and defraud some other members who may not be very aware of what is happening. So where it's a benefit to automate, it can also become a challenge and can change the power relations in the group. So someone who has that smartphone, it's kind of a power instrument. You are the person who is talking to the fintech and the NGO, and therefore you accumulate a lot of power, and that needs some way of checking or regulating. We are hoping today's discussion is going to help us demystify, but also put a practical lens and as the person who is on the ground, not as an NGO, not as a financial service provider, not as a fintech who wants the service to go on so that to get more money, but also consider that vulnerable person who may not have all the advantages that we may have here. So I'm hoping those who will speak, especially the humanitarians, you really put in the heart of a refugee and consider yourself as a refugee and ask, what would this mean for me? And what kind of problems do I see in the future? Or what kind of benefit? And is this a benefit that I would like to carry on? If I carry it on, what is the criteria for us to say, if this group is going digital, they need to meet criteria number 1, 2, 3. If they cannot meet this, they should stay manual because it's more beneficial. Otherwise, we may be picking scarce resources and putting them in a pot where there's no sustainability. I beg to stop here.
That was an excellent ending, Paul. Thank you very much. Before we're going to go into the breakout groups and before we're going to be saying goodbye to the online people, I just wanted to introduce it very quickly, generally. So this is going to be the main activity of the workshop, where, as Paul has already indicated, we'll ask all of you to switch your role. So you'll be playing another actor's role while you're giving a scenario and trying to decide whether the group from that scenario does indeed become digital or not. So please, everyone, and especially people online who will be self-selecting their role, try to pick the role that's not your own in your day job and try to really enact that role. So each breakout group will be holding a meeting to decide whether the group from that scenario will go digital or not. The flow of that discussion will be the following. You'll get into your role, you'll read the scenario. For people online, you'll be listening to the scenario. Then you'll be discussing advantages, disadvantages, and risks of going digital. Then you'll, as a group, decide whether or not this savings group should go digital, in fact, or not, and what type of digital. And then you'll list the benefits and the challenges of that choice. I know it's a little overwhelming, but we have a lot of people who are going to be helping out with these breakout groups. So each group will have an assigned person who can help you walk through the different exercises. So I just also wanted to say that after the breakout groups, which will be about an hour, we'll have a formal time for a break, online as well as in person. So hold off on the snacking until after the breakout groups. But of course, if there's no queue, feel free to grab a cup of coffee at any time if you're in the room and also online. So for the people who are on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, we are live streaming at the moment. We will end the live stream here, but we'll have another one, a second one, where we're doing the virtual fair of service providers, and that will be at 12:40. So please do come back for that. And then now we'll say bye to the people online. We'll leave them in the capable hands of Charlène, who will be explaining you, giving you a bit more details about what you're going to be doing next. So for the people in the room, we're all going to be moving to the next room where there are breakout tables set up. Andy has been assigning people to roles on these breakout tables. So take a walk around, see if you can find your own name. If you cannot, go and find Andy and she will.
Hi everyone. So we are switching to breakout groups online now. Kulain will send you in different groups in a moment, and you will be with a facilitator. So we will have 6 groups, and our facilitators for today, thank you so much for doing this, playing this role with us. We will have John Baptist from AFSI, Noah Lanzo from World Vision, Jimmy Latigo from DCA, Shoshana Hecker from Trickle Up, Alfred Kogoyeboa, Grameen Foundation, and Margaret Katutu from WFP. So we request that everyone turns on their video for this session to make it more engaging. You will be shortly sent to the breakout groups with your facilitator. To all the facilitators, you should have received all the links